Good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Improving ECG Data Quality and Availability, Automatic Transmission of Data from Devices into eSource Systems. My name is Andrew Jordan, and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and if you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using that chat panel. And at this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode, and please note that this event will be recorded and made available for future download. And at this point, I would like to thank Omnicom, who helped develop the content for this presentation. Omnicom Systems is dedicated to helping the world's pharmaceutical, biotechnology, CROs, research and medical device organizations maximize the value of their clinical research investments through the use of innovative and progressive technologies. Omnicom's electronic data capture and e-clinical technologies have been used in over 4,000 clinical trials around the globe. And now, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Our first speaker, Mark Metzer, is Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Mortara Instrument. Mark has led the clinical research business for Mortara for more than 10 years and has continually driven the Mortara ECG platform toward connected solutions within clinical research. By ensuring Mortara's ECG devices are specifically designed to meet the unique needs of clinical research, Mark has secured Mortara's leadership in cardiac safety and efficacy. And now our second speaker, Michelle King, is Director Early Phase Consulting for Omnicom Systems. Michelle has been involved in the implementation of various EDC systems for over 8 years and was previously involved in the management of early phase research sites. This combined experience allows Michelle to assist the Omnicom team in ensuring that their products exceed the needs and expectations of clinical trial sites and sponsors. Michelle's colleagues at Omnicom have worked closely with the Mortara team to develop the ability to automatically transmit data from devices directly into the eSource system, thus improving trial data quality and availability. And now, without further ado, I would like to hand the mic over to Mark Metzer. Mark, you can begin your presentation when ready.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for attending our webinar today. The title of our webinar includes the improvement and availability of ECG within clinical trials, and specifically within the clinical pharmacology unit. Today, the first part of the webinar will discuss the Mortara ECG solutions that are offered within the clinical pharmacology unit and how we've improved those over the recent years to not only optimize the ECG efficiency within the clinical pharmacology unit, but also the communication between Mortara and Omnicom, specifically in the Trial 1 package. We'll talk about how the ECG efficiency in the integrated workflow not only delivers better quality ECG results, but also delivers those results to systems that matter, so that we don't have an ECG silo at the end of the study, whereby we have to manage that ECG data in a separate way, but it's actually part of the trial as a whole, and the results make sense within the context of everything else that happens within the study. So from the ECG perspective, Mortara Instrument, maybe many of you are probably familiar with us. We've been around for 30 years. David Mortara was the founder of the company, and we have evolved from a small ECG manufacturer focused in the hospital world to become the leading ECG provider for ECG core labs about 15 years ago. We started out in trying to understand the workflow that's required for the ECG core lab to analyze centrally digital ECG data and how that workflow differs from the hospital-oriented workflow. And in spending that time, we identified many things that are different and that we could improve upon from the original hospital-oriented offerings that we and other manufacturers wanted to use within clinical trials. We've done many things from customized ID formats and within electrocardiographs to providing analytical tools in terms of algorithms and measurement and annotation tools within our eScribe data management system that are utilized today worldwide within ECG core labs. We expanded on that technology offering and began to partner with the FDA for providing the ECG warehouse about 10 years ago. And the ECG warehouse actually uses Mortara algorithms to analyze large quantities of data, specifically TQT studies that have been in the past submitted to the ECG warehouse for review by the FDA. We conglomerate that data within the warehouse, and then we apply our algorithmic tools to allow FDA reviewers to efficiently look through those large quantities of ECG data for any issues that they might be interested in within the data sets. So from the acquisition piece, whether it's at an investigator site in a late phase trial or whether it's at a clinical pharmacology unit, as we'll speak about today, all the way through the analysis and the final submission of data, ECG data, to the FDA within the ECG warehouse, we understand the workflow from beginning to end. We've used this knowledge for years to put ourselves at the forefront of ECG technology within clinical trials, and we'll continue to do that in the future. We offer, as you may know, many different solutions for ECG acquisition, and those include electrocardiographs, Holter recorders, and telemetry. The product that we find is the most successful and the best tuned for the workflow within the clinical pharmacology unit is the Surveyor 12-lead telemetry system. And the reason for that is the Surveyor telemetry system gives us 3 different device functionalities within the single unit. We can do continuous data acquisition with this telemetry transmitter like we would do with a Holter recorder. We can transmit from the telemetry device through either an antenna network or through the site's Wi-Fi to the Surveyor telemetry central system, and we can record that data at the central system rather than on a flash card like we might with a Holter recorder. We can provide 10-second 12-lead ECGs with this device, just like you would with an electrocardiograph, but coming from the central station rather than from a dedicated electrocardiograph device. And we can provide 12-lead arrhythmia monitoring. You may have experience with arrhythmia monitoring in the 3 or 5-lead capability from other systems in the past. This actually gives you a 12-lead view of arrhythmia and ST and QT and all the things that you would expect to measure within the ECG platform. So this system gives you the most complete view of the ECG and therefore cardiac safety continuously throughout a study conducted within the phase 1 unit. Many of you have spent a lot of time and years in the clinical pharmacology unit, and so you remember the days when we connected multiple devices to subjects to get as much data as we possibly could from them. We, in the past, have used dual snap electrodes to have Holter recorders continuously recording data on a subject, while we would then also connect a patient cable from an electrocardiograph to that subject and get a 12-lead safety ECG for analysis on site as the study progressed. You may also have had a 3-channel telemetry system on the subject, you get a real-time view of the safety data and possibly even pulse oximetry. And you can see as the on that subject that the real estate on the subject's chest is somewhat limited. And if you have all these wires on a subject for a long period of time, it confines them to the bed, and they're uncomfortable. And the result is muscle artifact, or subjects moving and creating noise within the signal because they're uncomfortable. If you look on the right, we have reduced all those technologies down to a single telemetry transmitter that can do 12-lead ECG, just like you would with an electrocardiograph, 12-lead telemetry rather than a 3-channel telemetry transmitter, and 12-lead Holter. We would have the capability to, again, record that 12-lead ECG data continuously onto the central station, and it results in us having a small device that only requires one patient cable that connects to the subject, allows them to be ambulatory, and allows us to then have all of this data being transmitted to the central station in a much easier fashion. The requirement that you might have for a electrocardiograph Holter and a 12-lead or a reduced lead set telemetry transmitter are gone, and you have the subjects walking around and acquiring this continuous data like you would with a Holter recorder, and you need to have them only lying down in the bed when they need to be, when there would be a time point coming up, and it reduces the burden on not only the subject but on the staff as well. In addition to the efficiencies that can be gained by having a single telemetry transmitter and acquiring all that 12-lead ECG data as we need it, we also are providing a improved measure of operational efficiency through the connectivity with the Omnicom Trial 1 system. The Trial 1 system is the system that's managing the study as a whole, and as a result, the Trial 1 system has all of the patient demographic information contained within it already. It has all the protocol definition already contained within it, and so we don't need to wheel around electrocardiographs to the bedside any longer and enter in demographic information and enter in a time point number and look at the wall clock and look at the clock on the electrocardiograph and synchronize those prior to acquiring a time point. We simply have the information for the demographics and the time points pushed to the Surveyor system from the Trial 1 system. And what that does is it, A, eliminates the number of operations required per ECG, and therefore increases the likelihood that we'll have a good quality and complete ECG with the right time point information. It also means that we are looking to have ECGs that are automatically acquired and automatically printed whenever they're required. So when the Trial 1 system sends a message to Surveyor and says it's time for an ECG on bed number 1 at 9:24 and 30 seconds, that ECG is acquired, and then it is either printed and available to the staff on the floor wherever they are, or it's automatically exported to the eScribe data management system for analysis. And then after that, the eScribe data management system can be viewed for sign-off of the interpretive statements and or interval duration measurements, and then saved and exported right back to Trial 1. All of this streamlines the workflow and puts the ECG in a digital state continually throughout the life of the ECG until it is actually pushed back to the EDC system where it is then stored. This all means that the ECG is now a piece of information that isn't as workflow intensive, isn't as much of a standalone piece of data as it used to be within the trial, and it means that it can be audit trail controlled and it can be in a digital format throughout its life and sent back to the EDC system. So the data entry in terms of demographics, the timing in terms of wall clocks and things like this is removed. The data entry after it would leave the Surveyor system in terms of putting it into a case report form or verifying the source data is all removed. It's all an electronic piece of data that is very well controlled and connected. This interface between the two systems means that it is as efficient as it possibly can be. And in terms of operational efficiency, again, it means that we have no demographic entry and therefore no mistakes. We have less to worry about. You can see in the picture, in the optimal workflow with an electrocardiograph at the bedside, we would be looking at maybe scanning a barcode to get the proper demographic information, but we would have to still enter a time point, and we would still have to look at a wall clock to time that ECG, and then afterwards connect that ECG device to a network and transmit that to either an ECG core lab or to an eScribe that would be on site. With the Surveyor system, we don't need to do any of that. Again, the demographics are sent to the Surveyor system from trial 1. The timing is defined by trial 1, and it is all automatically taken care of for us. The electrocardiograph workflow, again, still works, but it's not as connected. It's not as efficient for the staff. It produces paper results that can be transmitted electronically to a core lab or to an eScribe on site, but it's not as interconnected, and it's not as well interfaced with trial 1 as the Surveyor system would be. In either case, we can move that electronic ECG data after it's been acquired with Surveyor or with an electrocardiograph from the Surveyor system to the eScribe data management system for measurement and annotation right on site. The electronic calipers, as you can see on the screen there, can be placed on an ECG as soon as the ECG is transmitted from the Surveyor system into the eScribe system. And the interpretive statements and the overread that the site would like to do, the clinical pharmacology would like to do, can be done right on screen within an audit trail controlled environment at the CPU, and can be signed off within the eScribe system. And the eScribe system can then automatically create a PDF document and send that result directly back to trial 1 immediately. So in this sort of workflow, we would have basically no paper whatsoever within the ECG workflow. Everything would be acquired automatically, sent to the eScribe automatically. We could have an ECG eScribe workstation right on the floor so that the physician's work could be done digitally. The sign-off can happen right there. The completed product then, again, can be automatically sent to trial 1 so that we have a complete digital workflow that's integrated from start to finish and sent, the results sent back to trial 1. So from a graphical standpoint, this is how the workflow would look on site. We would have an EDC system, trial 1, providing demographics, time points in the first panel there, and all of the information, again, would be moving back and forth bidirectionally between the two systems. We would know then in the second panel that we would be acquiring time points for each one of the subjects on the floor. We could then send the ECGs directly to the eScribe workstation where we can measure, annotate, and send those completed results in a digital format back to the EDC system, trial 1, where we can store those ECG results, digital ECG results, with the rest of the data that's been acquired on the study. And again, we don't create this ECG silo of information that needs to be separated and looked at in a different manner and stored in a different manner than the rest of the data. We have a good feel for what the cardiac safety data looks like in the context of everything else that's going on with the study, and we have digital records of those results all the way through. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Michelle to talk to you about how the Trial 1 information is actually managed and how the integration works from the Trial 1 side, looking toward the Surveyor system.
Right, great. Thanks, Mark. So what I want to do now is expand on some of the things that you've heard from Mark and go into more detail on why we integrated these systems, how we did it, and what benefits we see coming out of the result of the integration of these systems. So our goal when we set out with this partnership was to facilitate the direct and automatic import of ECGs, including the data, the annotations, the traces or waveforms, into our Trial 1 eSource system. So why did we want to do this? Well, some of the most common measurements in early phase trials are vital signs, weights, and ECGs. And historically, the collection of these data points has been, at best, of low or good quality, but not of the best quality. And it has also been inefficient as far as the recording of the data at the actual time of collection, but also going forward in the study process. So starting out in clinical trials, we started with historical, archaic-looking ECG devices. We then went through a manual transcription from the data on that device onto a paper source, and it was then manually transcribed again from the paper source into a paper CRF, which, as all of you know, is very time-consuming. It's error-prone. You often lose your paper source or your traces. There's a manual audit trail, which is also error-prone, and it requires a lot of time as far as QCing that data and verifying the source to the eventual paper CRF. So then comes some improvement, and we moved from collecting data in the ECG device, manually transcribing it on paper, and then manually transcribing it into an EDC or ECRF system. This didn't really help much, except for back-end services. It made life slightly easier for data management and staff because now they had the data in a more workable format. So luckily, when we started out on this project, the FDA laid out our main requirements for us nice and neatly in the guidance. And so what we set out to do was eliminate all of the problems inherent in this process. So we wanted to reduce errors, eliminate the duplication of data, including double data entry, which is also error-prone, make sure that data was collected contemporaneously, so at the time that it's supposed to be collected per the protocol schedule. We also wanted to give the appropriate people immediate and direct access to the data in real time to increase safety, to increase data quality, and decrease errors and inefficiencies. One important thing to keep in mind when we were building this integration, and as you use this integration, is that when data is imported from a device such as the Surveyor or eScribe or even the Eli 250 systems, is that what is imported into the eSource system like Trial 1 is considered the source data. So just before we dive into my detailed slides about the integration and the benefits of it, I just wanted to flash up some terminology here because you'll be seeing these terms on my slides as we go forward. And I just didn't want to put any information on the slides that people were not aware of. So our first integration that we'll talk about today is our integration with the cart-based ECG devices. So things like the Mortara Eli 250 device. The way this actually works, as Mark kind of pointed out in one of his slides, is that Trial 1 has a schedule of the subject events built within the system. That schedule then associates with each individual ECG event a unique barcode number. And this unique barcode number becomes important in our integrations with all of their systems because it links that specific event for that specific subject on that schedule to the ECG that's going to be taken with the device. So the users at the site will print out these barcodes. They will scan that barcode. They'll then scan the Eli 250 or the cart-based ECG machine, which then marries the two together. That information is then sent from the ECG machine through UniPro into the eScribe data management tool for the ECG traces. Files are generated, so the data files as well as the PDF waveforms. Those are then sent to a directory where trial 1 is constantly monitoring, constantly listening for new imported files, and then trial 1 will consume those files and bring the data as well as the waveform back into the data collection and data review module. So it looks very simple and works very well for the cart-based ECG machines, but there's actually a more efficient model. The more efficient model is going to be the Surveyor model that Mark pointed out. So with the Surveyor model, we actually eliminate one of the workflow inefficiency steps, and that's the whole scanning of the barcodes and having to manually marry the trial 1 ECG event to the event on the ECG machine. So with the Surveyor-based model, what we've done is we have configured trial 1 to automatically send a request or an order for each ECG for every subject on your study from the system directly into Surveyor. And it does this at a configured time point prior to each ECG, so it sort of preps Surveyor to take the traces at specific time points based on your study schedule. Once that order is sent into Surveyor, Surveyor is then going to capture that ECG trace at the given time. And a couple of things to note here is that if the time point changes for some reason, maybe the subject was not placed in a supine position in time, maybe your dose has changed, Surveyor is actually going to listen to trial 1 constantly and constantly be updating the subject's schedule. So there's no manual interjection needed in order to adjust your schedule from trial 1 into Surveyor, because there's that bidirectional communication going on that's allowing changes to automatically happen. So Surveyor is going to capture those traces. It's then going to wirelessly transmit that same ECG data, the XML file, which contains all of the parameters, annotations, and everything, as well as the PDF waveform into eScribe. eScribe is then available for the physicians or cardiologists to go in. They can review the traces, and data is sent back to trial 1 from that system. So if we look at it in a little bit more detail here, sort of a real-world flow of this integration, we can start with the trial 1 setup. So this is a screenshot here of our trial 1 scheduler tool where the subject's time and event schedule is built. It's built using global libraries, so reusable elements. You're going to build your automated ECG events. You're going to build the answers that you expect for your ECGs, including things like the QTCB, QTCF that can be automatically calculated within the system, your interpretations, your significance as well. You're going to assign that unique barcode because in both integrations, whether it's the cart-based model or the Surveyor model, that barcode becomes very important because it's your link, it's your traceability between the two systems of what's happening to the event as well as any changes to the event. With the Surveyor integration, the barcode is not scanned or used in the typical way. It's just used as a unique identifier. So your schedule is built in trial 1. The data is then ready for collection in the data collection module of trial 1. And as I said before, trial 1 is going to send an automatic order a little bit of time prior to the event actually occurring on the schedule to Surveyor. And then within Surveyor, you're going to have your monitor set up so that you can be looking at the different channels, the different subjects that are being monitored. You're going to start monitoring the subject and recording the data. Trial 1 and Surveyor are then communicating constantly, updating the schedule. Surveyor is giving notifications for when the subject was dosed. It's also giving any other notifications that you would like to configure to be seen in the upper panel. And then at the scheduled time, tracings will be automatically recorded from the trial 1 schedule in Surveyor. Once those tracings are recorded, the ECG XML data file is sent from Surveyor to eScribe as well as the PDF waveform. So within eScribe, which is where you're going to review your tracings, you're able to do things like edit the findings and comments. It will bring in some automatic findings and comments, but those are fully editable. It's going to bring in the demographics, which Mark mentioned before. And this is a key thing to highlight here because typically up to 30 or 40% of errors seen within ECG collection have been because of mismatched demographics. And so because Trial 1 is actually taking the demographics from system variables in the subject's recruitment file and pushing them into Surveyor, you're not going to get those errors and you're not going to see all those queries based on mismatched demographics from the trace or the ECG data and your source data. You can also, from this eScribe window, review other ECGs. So the 1 hour time point versus the 3 hour time point, baseline versus post-op. There are various tabs as well as ways to open the different ECGs for the subject's study data and review them within the eScribe system. Also to mention here is you can also come in and indicate significance as well as put interpretations of the ECG trace. Once the data is reviewed within eScribe, it's then, as Trial 1 is constantly listening to that system, it's going to bring that data into the Trial 1 data collection and review screen. So you can see here in the right-hand panel, we've got imported ECG data directly from the Surveyor system. It's going to do all of the nice things like highlight out-of-range data. So data that's above normal range is going to be highlighted in red. It's going to force edit checks on out-of-range data. It's going to force comments on unexpected or undesired answers, such as abnormal or clinically significant. It's also going to check for the format of the data, making sure that you have those decimal points and leading zeros to make data management a little bit happier in the end as well. And this import of data from the eScribe system into Trial 1 can happen in two ways. It can happen manually via the Trial 1 import tool, or it can happen automatically. Obviously, automatically is the much preferred method because Trial 1 is just sitting there listening and then bringing in your data. All you have to do is go into the screens and review it and sign it off. So what benefits have we seen from our integrations with both the CART-based ECG tools as well as the Surveyor system? So obviously, we're eliminating those demographic errors that have been a significant part of queries and issues before with ECG data and paper. We know that the data are always accurate. As long as your machines are calibrated and people are using them correctly, the data is going to be represented accurately from Surveyor or the CART-based tool into Trial 1. It's always going to be legible. No more reading or interpreting other people's handwritten annotations. The data is contemporaneous. So because Trial 1 is constantly communicating with the Surveyor system, we know that the data is occurring at the time that it's supposed to based on that subject schedule. Going back to that quote that I showed earlier, the data is the original eSource data. It's attributable because there's actually audit trail stamps throughout this whole process. So both systems are recording who is doing what and when, even when you're just making a comment against the trace or with, against the data within Trial 1, audit trail stamps are being applied. Again, I mentioned the automatic edit checks as well as the alerts. So you're still going to get your alerts showing up in the Surveyor system, showing in the different panels within the different channels and beds that are shown on the screen. We're eliminating the errors associated with manual transcription, whether it's from source to paper and then paper to eCRF or into a paper CRF. And we're also eliminating significant time that your sites are spending on double data entry, source data verification, internal site QC. We're eliminating all of those steps since we know that the data coming over is accurate and it's the source data itself. So there's no need for comparison against different data sources. We're completely eliminating the potential to lose the paper source or the traces. So this, is still a problem at several units, and with the use of these integrations, there's just no paper to lose. Of course, the electronic audit trail is a very important element of this, and also improving the workflow. So the CART-based integration is a nice workflow. It eliminates a lot of steps that were happening previously in sites, but the Surveyor model is really the preferred model, again, because you're eliminating any manual error or issues with the scanning of the barcodes. And so the Surveyor process eliminates that by sending those orders automatically. And how are we improving data availability? Well, Trial 1 is a real-time eSource system. It's browser-based, so anybody can access the data at any time, as long as they have the proper credentials. So your sponsors, DSMB committees, cardiologists who are somewhere else around the world. And what this does for your trials is it's going to increase your safety. You've got that cardiologist looking at data as it's coming in live 4 hours post-dose or even 1 hour post-dose. They're able to look at it and interpret it and raise adverse events in real time. It's going to decrease your protocol violations. Again, because people are able to access the data in real time, they're able to pick up on issues or trends or errors that need to be adjusted to avoid protocol violations. Increasing trial efficiency. This is just a given anytime you're using an eSource system because you're able to reuse elements as well as utilize the advantages of device interfaces in order to eliminate timely monitoring costs. Cleaner data is available faster. Because of the edit checks within the systems, you're getting cleaner data in real time. It's firing edit checks, making sure you're commenting on out-of-range data, and making sure you're commenting on unexpected data. So it's more readily available faster for anybody to review it. And that includes sponsors, consulting doctors, as well as monitors. The data is in one place. So historically, the data has been in multiple places, whether it's a couple of different systems that the site is using, or it's a system plus some paper source plus the ECG eScribe data management tool. The data is now all in Trial 1 since the systems are actually putting those XML files and those PDF files directly into the Trial 1 data collection and review tool. So your monitors and your sponsors and your consulting physicians only need to go to one place to look at all data. This also allows them to do real-time reporting and exporting. So this again goes back to those DSMB committees where you need data immediately, and it has to be good, clean, reliable data in order to make decisions like going forward with doses or increasing doses for subsequent cohorts. I've touched numerous times on eliminating the lengthy timeline for transcription and source data verification. But the last point that I want to make is that the data is always available. And this is one of the additional points that they're making in addition to Alcoa is having the data be enduring. So having the ability to always go back and access the data, whether you're comparing it to a future or a later study that is similar with the same drug, or if it's a regulatory agency that needs to go in and look at your data. By using the eSource system and having all of the source data from devices like the Mortara Surveyor system or even the CART ECGs, having it all within Trial 1 means that those agencies can come into Trial 1 at any time and review all data. They don't have to come to your site and sift through folders as well as other systems to find what they need. And with that, I will turn it back over to Andrew.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Michelle, and also thank you to Mark for his portion of the presentation. At this point, I would like to invite our audience to continue sending their questions and comments in right now using that questions window for this, which is the Q&A portion of the webinar. And I've already received some questions here, so let's start with the ones that I have. Our first question, actually I'll ask two questions in the first question if I could. Can unscheduled ECGs be handled with this integration, and what is the implication of eSource for protocol changes or amendments?
Sure. So I'll take that question. Absolutely. We can handle protocol changes, protocol amendments, or even just simple unscheduled events with both systems. So as I said before, Trial 1 and the Surveyor system are constantly communicating back and forth through the bidirectional integration. So Surveyor is listening for any changes from the Trial 1 protocol, whether it's an unscheduled event or a complete protocol amendment, and it's applying those changes to the traces that it's taking at the various time points.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question here. Understanding that solutions exist to push ECGs from Mortara Surveyor to the OMCM database, Are there also solutions to either, one, push mobile ECG cart data directly to the OMCM database, or two, utilize Surveyor as a host to push ECG data to the OMCM database? So your thoughts on that two-part question.
Absolutely, for both parts. So as I showed in some of my first slides, the integration between the Eli 250 cart-based ECG device and Trial 1. So we can definitely handle pushing data from the cart-based ECG devices into Trial 1. It's very similar to the Surveyor process. The only difference is the scanning of the barcodes in the beginning, but both processes will serve as sort of the host for the ECG data. It's then pushed into eScribe and then brought into or consumed by Trial 1.
Great, excellent. Thank you for that. Another question here. If there is still a need to utilize mobile ECG carts, can ECGs sent to eScribe from the carts have edited ECG values sent to the EDC system without Surveyor being a part of that equation?
Yeah, that's in either workflow, the ECG is either sent from an ECG device, mobile cart, or from the Surveyor system. Would generally go through the eScribe system for measurement, annotation, and or editing of any interpretation. And from the eScribe system then would be sent to Trial 1 in the form of results, whether it would be PDF or XML or CSV or whichever format is required per protocol.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Mark, for that. I have another question actually just for you, Mark. This person was referencing an early slide that you referenced SpO2, but this audience member didn't see it in the S4 12-lead ECG transmitter. Does the S4 support SpO2?
Okay. So the S4 is a new transmitter and does not yet support SpO2. The T12S transmitter that we have is the SpO2 transmitter. So not at this point, but well, let's just say not at this point.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. Moving on to our next question. Does the Trial 1 system only work with the Surveyor system, or can it be utilized with a standalone ECG machine such as the ELI 150C?
Yeah, so it does work with standalone ECG machines. We have the integration with the Eli 250. Mark, do you know specifically if we also integrate with the 150?
Yes, the integration is exactly the same, whether it's the
Perfect.
250C or the 150C.
Great, excellent, thanks. Great to know that. Moving on to our next question. What if you update data in eScribe after the event is signed off in Trial 1? What happens there?
Great question. So I assume that's a cardiologist or a physician going back in and reinterpreting an ECG, maybe based on an AE or something. What Trial 1 will do is, because it's constantly listening for any changes or new files coming from the eScribe system, is it will bring in those new files. And since it's associated with that unique barcode, it will actually put that same data onto the same event. And it will then sort of archive the initial data brought over as part of the audit trail for that event. And that audit trail is fully accessible within the data review and data collection module, so that users can see both events in real time.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Michelle. Another question here. What if the dose is late?
If the dose is late and you're collecting the dose in Trial 1, it will then reschedule all post-dose events accordingly to the new dose time, and Surveyor will pick up on that new time and reschedule all of its time points accordingly.
Great. Well, thank you very much for those answers. We have reached the end of the question and answer portion of this webinar. If you do have any further questions, however, you can direct them to Michelle or Mark via the email addresses showing on your screen right now. That's mking@omnicom.com or mark.metzer@mortara.com. Thank you, everyone, for participating in today's conference. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with access to the recorded archive for this event, and a survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated, as it will help us improve our further webinars. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers for today, Mark Metzer and Michelle King. We hope that you found this conference informative. Have a great day, everyone.